it's time to weep. It really is. Now we're here in history class, and we're here to teach you all a history, the good and the bad of America. And this is the bad, and we got to learn it because it happened, and we got to fix it or never make this mistake again. So let's go on that. It was called the Trail of Tears, and it was a long trail west that people were forced to walk. As they went, they wept because they didn't want to go. They didn't want to leave their homes, their farms, their hunting grounds, the land of their fathers and mothers. The people who wept were Native Americans. They were being forced to go by white soldiers with guns and by President Andrew Jackson, who was famous as an Indian fighter. The Cherokee were stubborn. They refused to move west. They refused to give up their land. They appealed to the government. Two congressmen, Henry Clay and Daniel Webster, said the Indians were right. Their land was their land and no one else's. In 1832, Clay ran for president against Andrew Jackson, who was seeking a second term. The Cherokees prayed that Clay would win. Everyone seemed to think he would, but he didn't. Jackson was popular. He was a man of the people, a man of the frontier, in many ways a good president. Most U.S. citizens agreed that the Indians should move west. They approved of Jackson's Indian policy. But sometimes the majority is not right. The case of the Cherokees was argued before the Supreme Court. Court cases are named for those who are on the opposite sides in the conflict. The case was called Worcester v. Georgia. The V is for versus, which is Latin and means against or opposed to. It was Georgia, then the largest of the 27 states, against Worcester. Worcester was a man named Samuel Worcester. I'm glad he says his name right. It said it on there, so good. You never know sometimes with the name. He was a congregational minister, a missionary, who had come to the Indian Territory to teach school and to preach Christian doctrine. Georgia passed a law saying all white men in the Indian portion of the state needed to be licensed. The law was really meant to get rid of the preachers who were taking the side of the Cherokees. No one would give Sam Worcester a license. Worcester was arrested twice. In order to stay out of jail, he moved to North Carolina and continued his work from there. His wife and children stayed in Georgia. Then his baby died. When he came home to be with his wife, Worcester was arrested again. He was tried, found guilty, and sentenced to 4 years' prison at hard labor. He appealed his case to the Supreme Court. The old man, who was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, could remember British times and the Indian treaties of the old days. He was a man with a mind as straight as an Indian's arrow. Do you know his name? Hint. He was Thomas Jefferson's cousin. The great Chief Justice wrote a famous opinion in Worcester v. Georgia. A justice's words are called an opinion. That opinion is still read and cited as a statement of fairness on human rights. It went beyond the case of Samuel Worcester. The court ruled on the issue of Indian ownership of their own land and their right to govern themselves. Great Britain, said the Chief Justice, considered the Indians as nations capable of maintaining the relations of peace and war, of governing themselves. She made treaties with them, the obligation of which she acknowledged. Now here's the important part. The Cherokee Nation, then, is a distinct community occupying its own territory, in which the laws of Georgia can have no force, in which the citizens of Georgia have no right to enter, but with the assent of the Cherokees themselves. The most famous of all Chief Justices, yes, it was John Marshall. Had a whole lot more to say, but you get the idea. The Cherokees have won their right to their own land, and to decide if Sam Worcester could teach and live on that land. The Supreme Court said that the Indians have a present right of possession. In other words, it was unconstitutional to push the Indians from their land. Only it didn't matter. The President, Andrew Jackson, refused to enforce the law. Our American system of checks and balances failed. I'm sorry to have to write this. It was a terrible moment in U.S. history, but the truth needs to be told. People in Georgia wanted Indian land. I don't want to pick just on Georgia. The same thing happened in many other states. So the Indians of the eastern woodlands went west. Some fought before they went. The Sauk and the Fox in Illinois fought especially hard, but their case was hopeless. The Choctaws were first. They moved in 1831. 3 years later, the Chickasaws trudged west. The Creeks signed a treaty that said, "They shall be free to go or stay as they please." It didn't matter. In 1836, they were sent west, some with chains around their necks. The Cherokees set out in 1838. They left their homes and walked west against their wishes. They went from their lush, fertile mountain lands to a region beyond the Mississippi that few people wanted at that time. They walked the children, their parents, and the old people on hot days and cold. They walked in rain and windstorms. Often there was not enough food. Often there was no shelter. Always there was sadness. For 1 of every 4 of them died during the cruel march. The government said the new land would be theirs forever. But when the white people moved west, they forgot their promises to the Indians. They took their land again, and again, and again. Okay, so not a very... 1 out of 4 died. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay, that's as bad as some of the bad stuff you hear other countries do. So that's something we did in the past. All right. Good night, and hopefully we'll have a better history later on.